My name is Lexi Kite. I am the Senior Director of Development and Alumni Relations at the SJ Quinney College of Law. We are so excited to have an amazing panel here today as we celebrate Women's History Month in March 2026. We have a panel with a moderator and 3 panelists of SJQ alums who are trailblazers in their fields. We are really grateful to have them here today. I'm going to give a quick introduction to each of them, and then we'll turn it over to the group. Our moderator today is Erica Larson, graduated in 2017. She's a juvenile law clerk attorney at the Utah State Courts and is one of only 3 staff attorneys advising and supporting the entire juvenile court administration team and judiciary statewide. Prior to joining the courts, Erica spent 7 years as a civil litigation trial attorney with a diverse practice, representing clients in a wide range of disputes, including complex corporate and commercial litigation. She currently serves as the Executive Secretary to the Young Alumni Association Board here at the College of Law and is a past Executive Secretary for the board governing the Young Lawyers Division of the Utah State Bar. Erica is an animal lover as well as an avid thespian, periodically joining community theater productions around the valley to keep her performance spark alive. And she will be moderating our panel. Thank you so much, Erica. We have Anne Freeland here. I'm blocking her a little bit. She graduated in 2007. Anne is a litigation attorney at Michael Best. She represents clients in a wide range of business disputes and regulatory matters. She is the current president of Women Lawyers of Utah. She also served on the board of Rocky Mountain Innocence Center and the Utah State Bar litigation section. Outside of work, she enjoys snowboarding, mountain biking, and traveling with her 2 sons and her husband. Thank you so much for joining us today, Anne. Susan Taylor Hansen is right here. She graduated in the class of 1976. That counts her among the first 100 women barred in Utah, which is an amazing accomplishment. And this is her 50th anniversary graduating from law school. Susan was among the first 100 women admitted to the bar, and over her career in environmental law, primarily with Cooper, Spong, and Davis in Portsmouth, Virginia, she represented public agencies, developers, and property owners in complex environmental matters, while also serving in leadership roles with the Portsmouth Planning Commission, the Virginia Board of Soil and Water Conservation, and Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Now, back in Utah, Susan enjoys time with her family, including a daughter who is a University of Utah Law alum and spends her free time skiing, cycling, and developing her craft as a ceramicist. Thank you so much for joining us today, Susan. And finally, we have Shelby Jaye Hughes, who graduated in 2017. Shelby is a senior associate at Pia Hoyt, focusing on business, construction, and real estate disputes, representing clients in matters involving contracts, trade secrets, land use, including advocacy before Utah's appellate courts. She has also represented court-appointed receivers managing a $23 million receivership estate. She is the past president of the Young Alumni Association here at the College of Law, and she serves on the board of Women Lawyers of Utah as Retreat Committee co-chair. Outside of work, she enjoys running, skiing, football, and spending time with her husband, son, and rescue dog, Sofie. Thank you so much for joining us today, Shelby. I will pass the time over to Erica to moderate this panel. Oh, I should also mention that if you have questions, you can submit them in the Slido. You'll see that link on your screen, and Erica will be managing those questions, so we can kind of answer them throughout, or if you want to save time at the end, we can do it at the end too.
Perfect. Okay, is that working okay? Awesome. Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone who is watching and joining us. I think we're going to have a really robust discussion today to chat about the role of women in the legal profession and how that's progressed and what we still have left to do. So I just want to start out with a kind of general question to the entire panel. As we heard in the introduction, this year marks the 50th anniversary of the first 100 women admitted to the bar. And so my question to the panel is, what does it mean to you personally to be a part of this moment? Particularly for Susan, if you want to address did you feel like you were a part of a distinct shift when you were graduating? And what were you most excited about and most worried about, and how has that kind of shaped over the course of your profession? And then to everyone, when you think about the evolution of women's legal practice, what does that evolution look like from your perspective? And just tying that into kind of what it means to you to be a part of this moment now in the profession.
Shall I go first?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
I'll be honest. I think at the time that I graduated, I had no clue that it had taken the Utah bar that long to get 100 women. And I learned quite a bit later in my career when I got a phone call about a banquet for it. And we did not feel that we were really at the cusp of anything. I think what we felt is that there was a giant wall ahead of us. You've got to think about those times, we were not far away from the early, and you've got to think about the predominant culture in Utah and how they regarded women at that time. And the Equal Rights Amendment was being vigorously opposed on the grounds that women belonged at home. I think the profession was dominated by that culture, not all, but many. And the opportunities for us really had to be just fought for. And I think that I am most admiring of my colleagues Denise Dragoo, Jan Smith, who stayed and just excelled in that climate. I fled. And what I found, interestingly, was another version of what was happening here to a lesser degree. It still was very much the case that I was usually the only woman at the table or in the room. That didn't last long. And now that I have a daughter who graduated from the law school, I think about 12 years ago, I am so thrilled with what I see.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Do we want to move to you?
Sure. I think it's a reminder. It's interesting to me. It was only 50 years ago, but what you did back then was radical, right? And now it feels it's normal, essentially. Mm-hmm. So that's so interesting to me to think that in a 50-year period, we went from something that was just groundbreaking to something that is more normal now, and that's great. We've made such improvement that it is normal and women are accepted in the legal field, but then there's always the reminder that we're not done. There's still a lot of barriers that we need to work on, and we can't just stop. We need to keep fighting the fight. So,
and I would just join in to Annie's sentiment that 50 years doesn't seem like that long, but so much has changed over the 50 years time. But also I think women in professional roles, particularly in the legal field and then particularly in Utah, we have a long ways to go. And so I kind of think about the evolution was like the first step was just getting access. And the second was maybe at least there was one woman who was in a management or leadership or part of that meeting. So kind of a visibility. And then we're in this phase of trying to evolve the structure of the legal profession. And I think that extends to all professional women as well.
Thank you for that. I think that leads us really nicely into a couple of questions that we have to talk about, sort of the barriers that women have historically faced in this profession, but also barriers that women still face in this profession. So the question for each of you is, when each of you joined the legal profession, what did you think would be the biggest barrier facing women in the profession? And then what ended up being the largest barrier that you have faced or did face in your profession? And were they different from your expectations? Did they change over time or evolve? Why don't we go in reverse order and start with Shelby this time?
So I think I had the stigma that all of these barriers would be really explicit and more tactile, where a lot of them are implicit and are embedded into different institutions. And I think we're going to touch on some of this later. But, there's not the overt policy that women can't be partners and that there's different partnership tracks for men or women or different promotions at different types of organizationals or institutionals. But I still think that there's the implicit barrier that the legal profession, to me, still feels like very much set up for a person to work 12 hours a day and have their home managed by somebody else in the background, and their only responsibility is to be a financial contributor. And then in that same breath, yes, we may be in the meetings, but I think some of the barriers are that we're still perceived to be better at organizing and note-taking. And if we aren't good at that, we are viewed as lesser, whereas men are given the exception of, oh, yes, they're not great at organization, but they're such good oral advocates, so they get a pass on that. And so those are, I guess, some of the, what I came to the profession thinking that, oh, it's just going to be harder. I have like these glass ceilings to break, where really it's like I'm trying to break through the cement walls behind us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We can actually just go down the line if you want to go next, Susan.
I'm tickled to hear you talk about being assigned the note-taking role. That brings back some memories. I think the biggest barrier that I continually face, and over time, it really changed, but just for me. I think other women continued to deal with it. Were the older men in the profession when I was a younger woman, the women that they knew were at home, being that household manager, and if they weren't, they experienced quite a few women who found it so difficult when they decided, if they did, to have children, that they left the profession. And I have 4 children, and that was probably an outrageous number of children, given what I was doing. But I think that it, over time, me insisting that it's going to take a certain amount of time for me to do dental appointments and go to their assemblies and so forth, and get some accommodation for that. Then they started to ask for that time for their children. And more, the younger colleagues of mine then had spouses, because the economy kind of demands it and because women sometimes enjoy it, that worked full time, and they could manage their lives in a similar way.
Yeah, I that sums it up. Both of those actually are same points that I would hit on. I think Shelby's point that it's easier when there is bias that you can address, that's real or that's visible. It's the implicit bias, it's the underlying assumptions that you're going to respond or do something differently because you're a woman. Those are the harder things to overcome, and I think those are more substantial barriers. And I remember when I first started, there was a lot of pressure, I felt like, to defy those, right? I'm gonna try and be more, the traditional role of a man. I remember when I had my first baby, I think I said, I'll only take 2 weeks off. And 6 weeks later, I called my partner in tears and said, I need just a little bit longer. But I did go back, I feel like, too quickly. And I think now, as Susan's point is, I think now as more women are standing up and saying, this is what I need. I can still be a great attorney, an effective attorney, and I need these things as well to attend to my family and that kind of thing. Now I look at it, and there's so much more freedom for women to say, yeah, I want to take a few months off. I need to do that. Or I need to take time to be with my children. And I think that that's a huge improvement, and it makes it possible for women to both fulfill the role as a mother or a daughter or a sister or whatever they may need to be, as well as being effective attorneys.
I did take 2 weeks with my first baby, and it was just a mess. I really, I had, that was all the vacation I had, and it was wrong of me not to ask for more, but I really didn't feel like I could. The second child, my partner at the time said, "We've got an extra room. Put the crib in there." And actually, while the baby was very small, I never nursed, but it was really nice. And after she got a little more active, then we made other arrangements. But she was there for a couple months, and it worked out.
That's great.
That's interesting because I think that even a few years ago, there was a push or a law that was passed in Utah that created a pilot program for state employees, at least in some sectors, to bring their small infants to work with them.
It's trying to get codified.
Is it trying to get codified right now? Cool.
Wow.
So that brings up a really interesting point, and it sounds like women have been doing that to the extent they can years before laws and regulations have caught up with it. With that being said, we're still seeing an astronomical amount of women leaving the legal profession, which has historically been a problem and is still a problem. So kind of feeding off of your answers, I'd like the panel to address why you think women now are still leaving the profession at greater rates than men are, despite the fact that the advocacy work that women have done in the profession have also opened up doors for men, like you were saying, Susan. But we're still seeing women leave at a higher rate or a greater rate than men. And I'm curious what all three of you have seen in kind of your various worlds in the legal profession. Go ahead, Anne. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm wondering, as you're saying this, I'm wondering whether that rate is higher in Utah or outside of Utah. I would assume it's maybe higher in Utah, as many of the topics we are addressing today would be. And I think it's a couple of things. I think one of them, though, is this underlying, while we are visible and we are present, I think we may not have as many opportunities for leadership. I was really happy listening to Susan's bio as it was being said at the beginning about how she had leadership roles. I think that's something that's missing and can help women stay relevant and present in the legal field, is being able to have more of an influence, more of a fulfilling position, and I think leadership roles help with that.
I do too. I think you're more likely to make it work if you enjoy what you're doing. And if forces combine to make it hard for you to just enjoy going to work and enjoy your colleagues and develop, a passion for your work, you are much more likely to leave, particularly if it is just constantly made hard.
That's a good point. Shelby?
I think I have 3 points. The first is probably not going to be a popular opinion. Being in Utah, I think we do have a fair amount of women who want to go to law school, but they don't necessarily want to practice. I think there were 5 from our class, and that was within the last 10 years of at least 5 women went to law school, endured the whole thing, and I kind of asked one of them at the end, like, why did you do this? And she was like, I need a backup plan in case something happens to my husband, but otherwise I'm never going to practice law. And I was like, okay. So I think there's a different culture, particularly in Utah, because we do still have so much of a stigma culture that encourages women to stay at home. There's the opportunity to get an education, but not an opportunity to get into the workforce. Second, I think we've all touched on briefly, kind of maternity policies, and they're still crap in Utah. I think there's a few, particularly with some of the national and international firms coming into the Salt Lake market, that have better parental leave in general, but there's very progressive firms in Utah that they're still debating whether or not there should be a 3-month leave. And so I think that's just an audit. And if I'm not wrong, I don't believe the state of Utah has a maternity policy, but I think they just have short-term disability, but I could be wrong on that.
There might have been a bill this year that was doing work on that for certain state employees, but I'm not sure where it landed.
And then along those same lines, I was just listening to a gal who writes for the ABA and is really prominent in the tech legal collision and how that's all intersecting. And she brought up a point that I've kind of seen in my own practice, is that if you don't go back to the workforce after 3 years, your resume kind of dies. And so I think just inherent in kind of the legal structure that we've talked about is like there's not as much flexibility, not only in maternity or parental leave, but also if you do choose to take that leave for longer than like the profession will allow, getting back in and breaking back in is really challenging.
That's a really good point.
I have to say, when you said something to fall back on, that is a phrase that was actually used, I think, many years ago when women in the predominant culture were starting to get advanced degrees and starting to look at a profession. From the top, you heard, oh, you should do that so that you have something to fall back on. But I think parental leave and daycare is so critical. I have a daughter who lives in San Francisco where they have 100% subsidized daycare.
Are they looking to hire anybody?
I'm telling you, it made the difference between, she had this beautiful child, and they would have liked to have had another child. And then when that law changed and fully subsidized the daycare, she's going to have a little boy in August.
Congratulations.
And I am fully convinced that I have that mayor to thank, so it is so important. I was on the board of a medical school for a time, and I was comparing notes with a fellow board member at Johns Hopkins. I was on the board of another school, and he said the number one recruiting element for their top draft neurosurgical resident was subsidized daycare on site. And I think that's where we need to evolve.
That's a really good point. In your answers, it popped up the kind of relationship between the culture in Utah versus national statistics. So as of 2020, women in Utah held 50% fewer partner positions than the rest of the country.
Wow.
But it's still an abysmal amount for the rest of the country too. So the numbers were 12% in Utah, 12% of women held partner positions, and 24% nationally. So we're still seeing numbers on a national scale that are really quite abysmal as well. So I appreciate the panel kind of talking about that dynamic, because I do think we face some unique challenges in this state that exist outside of the state, but maybe to a lesser degree.
Yeah, steroids here.
Right. It is on steroids, yeah. So as of 2020, in Utah, men are almost twice as likely as women to hold a leadership position. And I know that part of that has to do with women choosing to leave the field or being forced out of the field. But for women who stay in the profession, the question I have for the panel is, what do you think makes the difference between women who are staying in the profession but are not promoted or elevated to leadership positions versus men? And are there things that the profession could be advocating for to help even that balance out? We'll start with you, Susan.
Well, I think a lot of it comes from the top down. To the extent there are women partners, they ought to be in there changing the criteria that is used to make someone a partner, and start to value different things other than just pure revenue contribution. And I would love to see that happen. And I think, in a way, the more specialized women become, the more concessions they can ask for, and the more they can develop, a track for other women to bring value to the firm, other than just sheer volume of dollars.
Shelby?
I think coming from a more junior side of the panel, the way I see it is that women are already kind of tasked with the implicit bias or the implicit roles that are already taxing. And they're already taxed with probably carrying, even if they have a good supportive partner at home, they're still probably carrying more than that 50-50 burden. And I think technology is making everything actually harder for women right now rather than easier. And so when those leadership opportunities present, I think women kind of just feel tapped out, like that they are already asked to do too much, and they've been doing too much, and so they're just burnt out in a whole different way than men could even imagine.
That's right.
Yeah. Anne?
Yeah, I agree with both of those. And I think one more thing, it's important that we take what blame is there for us as well. I think a lot of times, and there have been a lot of studies on this, that women are essentially less assertive. If a leadership role comes up, we hesitate a lot more than men do for a variety of reasons, including burnout, but including other more internal issues. And I think that obviously that's an issue. Like I said, there have been studies that have shown that, and the best way to combat it is doing what I feel like a lot of organizations are doing, which is trying to give women the tools and the education to feel better about putting themselves forward and taking on those roles and being more confident about saying, hey, here I am. I can do this, and I can do it just as well as anybody else in the room. And I think that goes for a variety of professions, but especially the legal field, and not just in law firms, in judicial positions, things like that. I think we have a lot of qualified women who need the tools to just step forward into those positions.
Or nudge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nudges is good.
Yeah, and I think this brings up sort of the challenges of having a hierarchical system that is so prevalent in the legal field, right? We have it seems like in most practices, there is some sort of hierarchical level, whether it's associate to partner or like junior counsel to senior general counsel, or things like that. And so when you combine a hierarchical model with a model that has historically been dominated by men, what you are going to see is a challenge to elevate women to the higher positions. Which leads into another question that I'd like to pose the panel. Historically, it seems as though the legal profession has boasted mentorship or giving advice, counsel to amongst women lawyers. But there is a more kind of modern push towards sponsorship, which is providing advice and counsel, but also actively working to help advance opportunity for women. It could be nominating women to certain positions or advocating for them to get partner status. My question to all of you, we'll start with Shelby this time, but in your profession, have you seen the differences between mentorship and sponsorship, and how has that, if you have and have experienced it, how has that kind of shaped you and your profession? And secondarily, how do you think that we as women lawyers can better sponsor other women lawyers at each stage in our profession, not just when we're partner or at the top?
So I think I tend to agree, particularly with our our vintage of class or of lawyer, that there's been a big push to just find a mentor and then you go to lunch and you have advice and that person's in your network, but that person's not maybe at the institution that you are. And so really like professional advancement isn't as prevalent there. And as someone who's worked in smaller shops throughout my profession, there's not as many leaders, women leaders at the top. And so there's not necessarily that opportunity within the organization for them to, nominate me to be partner or nominate me to be on that case. So I think I've had to work at using my network in different ways and trying to get on different boards or organizations and doing a good job in that light, so that maybe what we would think of traditionally as like advancement through the legal career, I've had to forge my own way, where maybe Annie's on the board with me. Maybe Annie's not able to promote me to partner at my current organization, but maybe she can be a referral source or a helpline. Erica, I know that you were my helpline throughout my early career. If a partner gave me something I had never seen before, I'd be like, Erica, can you help me? Like, I've never seen this come across my desk before. And so I think of sponsorship and an expansive view of how can we promote women through advancement of their career outside of kind of the normal structure.
Excellent. Susan?
I think also, I was in a small firm as well, and one really remarkable thing happened is I got just a really juicy, productive piece of work because the wife of the person who was in environmental hell insisted that he hire female. And I was one of the few environmental lawyers in the state, but certainly in our area. And I was able then to go back to my firm when they had a gap that they needed a hiring gap to fill, to persuade them that we needed another female because there was value in people seeing a balance of genders in our firm. And we found someone really great. And I think they would feel, those who are still alive, that it really paid off.
I would say there's so many opportunities. I think a lot of the times we think of the big ones, let's nominate this woman for an award because she's very deserving of it, or let's recommend her for a promotion or that kind of thing. But there's a lot of little things too, just simply giving credit where credit is due. If you have a female member of your firm, a colleague, or anyone, and you point out, hey, she did a great job on this. She's very qualified at this, and just the little things of complimenting other women and lifting them up and giving them credit when they've earned it, I think goes a long, long way, and helps us all generally. I would also say that if you're needing sponsorship or membership, to ask. If you want, I don't think I know a single woman attorney who, especially that are my age, that if they had a younger female attorney approach them and say, hey, can you help me out, that they would say no. They would jump at the opportunity. I know I'm really excited when people ask me to write letters of recommendation or anything like that, because I don't know often that they need that help. So I would say definitely just ask the women that you know.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And I think tied to that, it's really interesting. When I was working more in private practice at a firm, obviously in a very male-dominated world, corporate and commercial litigation, one thing that I noticed myself starting to do is anytime a male lawyer would comment about a woman lawyer's participation in something or conduct or attitude or anything, I always found myself countering that by pointing out really, really amazing things that woman did, or ways in which those attitude points or choices that female lawyer made were actually maybe a good choice for the woman to make. And I think even doing something as small as that can help with sponsorship, because it changes the conversation. Instead of us as women talking amongst ourselves about ways to combat sexism in the workplace or ways to deal with implicit bias amongst ourselves, we're putting the conversation more into the open space where we're engaging our male colleagues in that conversation. So I really appreciated your answers with that. Are there specific policies or structural changes? We've talked about a lot about parental leave, but are there any other specific policies or structural changes that you have seen actually make a difference, or that you think no one's really doing but you think would make a large difference in terms of promoting women and helping sponsor women in this legal profession? We'll start with, let's start with Anne this time.
Okay, I would say I think there is more awareness, right, especially at some of the larger firms, and there's more of a conscious effort to be aware and promote women and give them opportunities. As far as policies, and this maybe goes off topic just a little bit, but a policy that I think is huge for helping women succeed, and honestly men too, is flexible hours. I think and a lot of firms are adopting that. I'm lucky enough to be at a firm that does, and it's fantastic. You work a reduced schedule, you get reduced pay, but you have more flexibility, more freedom, less pressure. And, like Shelby says, it kind of reduces a lot of that burnout that women feel, or at least lessens it. And I think it makes it a lot more possible for women to come and stay and succeed in the legal field. There's a young associate at my firm who is just fantastic. We love her to death. And she just had her first child, and she came back and is on a reduced schedule, and I see how big of a difference that makes in her life, and I think she's going to stick around a lot longer than she would have had she not had that ability to come back and still take a lot of time to be with her child. And again, I don't think this is limited to women. I think a lot more men are starting to take advantage of it and realize that it is better to have more of a work-life balance. So I think that policy is really big to help keep people happy and healthy in the field.
And I don't think that that's necessarily off topic either, because the people who make those decisions largely are men in boardrooms, right? Who set these policies, who set these procedures. And so to the extent we have women in the room who are able to advocate for those types of policies, that is another way in which women can be sponsoring other women lawyers, by actively creating more pathways for them to succeed. So I thought that was a lovely answer. Thank you. Let's go to Susan.
Flex time, 100%. I just think that means everything. However, I'm looking back over my career and thinking how much I valued sort of non-work interactions and brief conversations that help me get to know my colleagues on a much deeper level and what their, both male and female, personal lives were like and their needs were like. And I do worry that if the workplace, you look ahead and at all the changes we're going to experience with technology, that we will interact on a personal level with each other far less, that when it comes time to value our personal needs, that we don't have that foundational personal relationship. So I think there's a balance, and that time at the water cooler, as they used to call it, when you chat with your colleagues about what's going on with you, would be lost, would be a great loss. And, put that balance back, I think.
I appreciate that answer a lot. Yeah. Shelby?
In addition to flex time, I think a lot of firms are adopting ramp up and ramp down. So you do even further reduced hours leading up to giving birth, and then you do reduced hours like for the first 6 months when you come back. And I, as somebody who had a shorter maternity leave than I would like, it wasn't necessarily going back to the office that was hard, it was going back full time. Even if like flexible times considered or not, I think it's that ramp off and ramp down has really, from the women who I've talked to, have appreciated that. And I know we've talked about leave. I think mandatory family leave is an important structure so that women who are taking more time off don't get left behind from their male colleagues, and forcing men to actually take their full paid family leave.
That's interesting. I like that. That's interesting. That's cool.
Would you have to take their golf clubs away?
Yeah, you would.
Yes, they
And
have to do
hand them
all
a
the
rag
cleaning.
to clean the kitchen.
They have to do all the cleaning, the dishes, and
Absolutely.
the laundry during that time. Or I've seen other families be able to back leaves up against one another. So the mother takes the first 3 months, and then the father takes the next 6 months, and then you're not putting your
like that.
potato in daycare. You're almost a toddler at that point. So.
That's true. That's cool. When you see sexism and bias show up in the workplace today, how best do you find it to approach those conversations? I think there are a wide range of responses that you'll get from people with all sorts of different personalities. You'll get some who will fight back and say that's sexist, and you'll have some who will kind of subvert it and just try to like play by the rules, but secretly like working to change that policy or rectify that sexism. And then I think you'll also have some women who are just like, okay, I'll just like put my head down and bear it. What have you found to be the most effective way of dealing with sexism? Have you employed any one of those types of kind of strategic or even personality responses, and which have worked better for you than others? Let's start with Shelby.
I think anticipating that there is going to be sexism is step one to solving the problem. And step two is, even if you're in an organization where maybe there's not a woman ally at the top or in management, find an ally. And that might not be the most obvious person. And I've found that I've had to earn male allyship, and by doing that is making yourself indispensable. Be a good worker, do the hard work, take the hard assignment, do the extra proof on a brief, find a creative solution to a problem that nobody else can solve, so that you're a little bit more indispensable. So when you go to that person, whether it be a female or a male, and say, hey, this happened, this is happening over and over again. How can we address it? And also, don't just go to them with a problem, but go to them with a solution as well. And in that same vein, if you're comfortable, maybe that the person who's exuding the sexism isn't your ally. I like to do kind of what you suggested, Erica, and can I call that out in some way that's appeasing or palatable for the person who's being sexist? Can I point out something that's maybe a strength of the person that they're being sexist towards? Or can I just say, hey, that you can't talk about a woman that way? Depending on your interpersonal relationships, that's going to have to be the gauge. But I really think anticipating that sexism is going to occur and is just in every day-to-day life, and kind of coming up with a plan beforehand is a better strategic, or has been better for me in addressing it when it does occur.
Anne, let's go to you next.
I would say it's hard. It depends on your relationship with the person. I think that sometimes you can talk directly to the person, and I think that's preferable. But again, it depends on the relationship. I think at the beginning of my career, I would not have confronted someone directly. I think I'm a little bit better at that now. Maybe I just don't care as much if I offend them. But I do think you can do it. For the most part, from what I've seen, and I know that there are exceptions to this, but I think most sexism is not intentional. it's very, very unintentional, and it's a perfectly wonderful person who just has a subconscious bias or implicit bias, and they don't even realize they're manifesting it. And more often than not, if you very gently make a suggestion, hey, do you really think that that's limited to women, or do you really think that would have been different if so-and-so, who's a man, would have been in that situation? I think pointing that out, the person's appreciative more often than not. And women can be sexist too. I've had that happen where I had to point out to a woman that maybe she should think about what she's saying. And I think almost always people are appreciative of it if you can directly say, hey, maybe think a little bit about what you're saying. So,
Susan?
I'm prone to being maybe too direct, but I think if you, first of all, you stand on a firm footing like you do in terms of respect for you, and maybe you can inject some humor. Many, many years ago, I had a mother who was in the state legislature when the Equal Rights Amendment was being considered, and she bought a pot of pansies for the people who voted against it and put one on each desk. And it was subtle, but very direct. Mm-hmm. And she intended to continue to have a good relationship with those people, but she really wanted to call them a pansy. So.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. One of the things that I really found a lot of love for was when I think your point, Anne, is correct, is that most of the time, I think when I have seen sexism in the workplace, it's usually implicit. It's not usually people being overtly sexist or discriminatory. It shows up in much subtler ways. And one thing that I started doing when I would hear something is I would ask follow-up questions to a comment that I found implicitly biased or sexist, and I would ask kind of foundational questions to poke at where that was coming from, so that the person could discover it on their own that they were being a little sexist.
That's fantastic.
And then I never had to tell them that, and usually they're good enough to. I mean, sometimes they don't figure it out, but. It can be really alarming to have someone be like, you're sexist, and that's immediately going to put someone on the defensive. So to the extent we can still address it without overt accusations of with moral qualities to it, I think I've found some success there. So, okay, so moving towards looking to sort of the future of the profession. The legal profession is, we've talked about this a little bit, structured in a pretty resolute way, where it's been structured, the profession has been structured that way for a really, really long time. And within that structure, there's sort of a traditional model of success and what success looks like or means. We've talked a little bit about financial, like billing being a revenue source is really kind of the traditional model of success in at least private practice. Do you think that this model works? And if not, what do you think the structure of the profession, how do you think the structure of the profession should change to modify the ways in which we look at success in our profession? Let's start with Susan.
I think at the beginning, far more flexibility in work hours. You know, if someone is of value to the firm because they are specialized in a particular way and are willing to conform their compensation to the time that they put in, and they're fairly treated that way, I can see, I'm not the voice of the future, but I can certainly see a firm structure where an appellate person or someone who has a really, specialized skill would be allowed, and more of a niche kind of opportunity to suit their personal life. I think, and that there would not be any aspersion cast on that choice. I think as we see both men and women doing that, it will become less gendered.
Shelby?
I think what we've just talked about in the flex time and not having prejudice in taking that flex time towards achievement. I think what you tapped on earlier, Erica, is that we've viewed success in the legal profession in a hierarchical structure, and that you're only successful, if you make partner, if you're only successful if you're elevated to different senior roles. But I see women who stay associate or stay of counsel and are doing excellent work. And I think we could do better probably as, sponsorship and highlighting that they're still doing work and they don't need that title to be elevated into their career. But I think that's being recognized more and more as a non-prejudicial way to forge a completely acceptable career path.
We'll go to Anne next. I want to interject a little bit though and say we've talked a lot about flex time and that being a really, really positive way of creating more inclusion and diversity in terms of work style and work-life balance. But I think one of the things that keeps coming up for all of us is that even as those avenues are opened, there's still a stigma to utilizing those avenues. And so I'd like to try to address what changes we think can get at that. I think we're starting to see employers providing more and more opportunities for flexible work environments, but we do still have this overwhelming kind of resounding attitude in the profession that makes you less successful. And so, Anne, if you can answer the question and kind of talk to that, and then if we want to go back, and I'd like to get your thoughts on how do we change the stigma associated with success when we are taking alternative, quote unquote, alternative pathways in our professions.
Man, if I had the ability to change stigma, that would be magic. So I'm not sure I know the answer to this. I would say, though, again, encouraging people to use it. And I'll be honest, I encourage my male partners to use it, especially the younger ones who come in and are having children. I say, hey, take that time. You might as well take it. It's there. And I think that's a huge part of it is men also taking the time. I think firms that offer, and I think firms are realizing that offer not just flex hours, but flexible career paths. Maybe you don't have to go straight up to partner. Maybe you can do a lateral kind of position. And firms, more and more firms are offering those. I think to the extent we can encourage that would be good. I honestly, my firm doesn't offer this, and I'm jealous of the ones that do, but I think the firms that offer, the 4-month hiatus, the sabbatical, where they just tell their employees, every 10 years or whatever it is, if you've been here, you take 4 months off. We take you off the email. We,
Wow.
kill your access. And I've seen a lot of male, very successful male attorneys take that time. And I think it helps. And kind of tying it back together with what Shelby was saying, that sometimes it's hard if you leave for a significant period of time to re-enter. I think the more that there are programs like that where people can leave, men and women can leave for an extended period of time and then come back, that the firms adapt and they learn that, we don't fall apart if someone leaves for a long time and comes back, and it opens more doors for people to be more flexible with their time.
Totally. Did either of you have anything to add on that?
No, I
Okay.
think that's well said.
Okay. We're running low on time, so I just want to close out with a couple of questions. For Shelby and myself, the ask is going to be with respect to older generations, and for Susan and Anne, the ask is going to be to younger generation emerging women lawyers. But what is your ask to those populations to carry the torch forward, to keep the conversation moving, we've made a lot of progress, but what do we young lawyers want our older generations of female lawyers to be doing to continue carrying that torch forward? And what do the older generations of female lawyers want to see young female lawyers doing to keep that torch going? Let's start with Anne.
I was really hoping you'd start with Susan because I wanted to hear what she was going to say. But I will get to eventually. I gotta say, I am blown away. People like Shelby, I remember when I first met her and several other attorneys from that same generation, I was shocked. I thought, wow, I'm going to be out of a job because these women coming out of law school are just astounding. They're confident, they're brilliant, they're smart and wonderful, and we go to the interviews for new students, and every single one of them is just so overly qualified. It's amazing, and it gives me a lot of confidence for the future of women lawyers, that we have such stellar talent coming out, and I feel like we'll go very far with that. So I guess my ask would be, don't change. Keep doing whatever you're doing, because just the level of effort that women are putting in during law school and coming out of law school is really, I think, going to make a big difference.
I have to just concur. I am dazzled by my daughter's friends, by the young lawyers, the female lawyers that I'm meeting, and cannot imagine how different and how much better both the law school experience and the practice experience will be for them. And I think partly it's because they are who they are, but also because they are looking out for each other. And I think that makes all the difference.
Yeah. Shelby?
I mean, not to be an ask for more, but, I think the generations of lawyers in front of me are the ones who are at the decision maker table. And so I would say continue, now that maybe the more explicit tactile biases are gone, continue to push forward, continue to advocate for women, continue talking to young women lawyers and hearing about the hardships that they're experiencing now, to see if there's a way to help them creatively come up with solutions that they're facing today that maybe women didn't face 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Because I think there's going to be a lot of new challenges with the intersection of AI and the legal profession in the next 5 years. And so I think as sponsors and mentors, we also need to continue to grow in how we're advocating and helping the women below us, and then kind of, our colleagues and laterals.
I just have to echo that from Shelby, and honestly what Anne and Susan said as well. I think the general kind of theme with all of your answers was a sense of community, right? A sense of advocating for one another, whether that's cross-generational or within our own kind of generation of lawyers, is recognizing that we shouldn't be barriers to each other. And so I have personally been amazed to see some of my mentor female lawyers, even though sexism looked a lot different when they started the profession, still recognizing the ways in which it's changed, but it's still there, and being willing to advocate for their younger colleagues, even though it looks different. And I just maybe I've been honored and lucky to have awesome mentors, but I think it's really comes down to more a sense of community that we as women have in this profession. And to the extent we can continue nurturing that relationship and that sense of community, I think is the best way to keep carrying the torch forward. So
I agree.
Yeah. Well, that is time. I want to thank everyone for coming or for listening to us and hearing our chat. And I just would urge all of you to keep pushing women in the profession forward and keep advocating for them. And I think we'll see continued progress and success in the profession. But thanks for joining us today.